The scream did not come from her mouth at first. It came from the city itself. A long siren that rolled across the alien towers and shook the snow loose from the black cables above the street. And Yalin flinched the way he always did, like a man expecting the next sound to be his name called for execution. But when he looked up, he did not see soldiers or drones at first. He saw a figure stumbling out of the white storm. A woman shaped by hunger and cold, unclothed, bare skin already turning gray-blue, hair stuck to her face with ice, blood tracking down one thigh in thin frozen threads. And the sight hit him like a punch, because it was not only shocking, it was wrong. A living body exposed on a world where even the air was a weapon. And he took one step back out of habit, because he had learned that noticing someone was how you died. And then she dropped to her knees in the snow right in front of him, and her eyes found his with the desperate focus of an animal cornered, and her lips moved with a whisper so faint it felt like it came from inside his head. "Please pretend I'm your wife," and the words were so strange and so human that for a second he forgot how to breathe, because he had not heard anyone ask for tenderness in years. Not in this place where the Dominion ruled with cold logic and humans lived like rats in the cracks. And he wanted to say no, not because he was cruel, but because he was tired, because he was weak, because he was already broken and had nothing left to give, and because he knew what the word wife meant here. It was not romance. It was a legal bond, a claim, a contract stamped into flesh and identity, and it could protect her from random inspection. But it could also drag him into charges that would erase him completely. And yet his hands moved before his mind could stop them, lifting her up as if she weighed nothing, even though she was shaking so hard her teeth clicked. And the moment he touched her, he felt how close to death she was. Like a candle almost out, and behind them the scanlights began to sweep the street. Pale beams cutting through the storm, searching, hunting. And he understood that she had not chosen him because he looked safe. She had chosen him because he looked already dead, the kind of man no one would suspect of hiding anything worth chasing. And Yalin was that man, a human interpreter once employed by the Border Council, once trusted to speak for peace, then blamed when the peace failed, beaten by human mobs for loving aliens, spat on by alien guards for being human, thrown out of both worlds like trash. And now he survived by fixing broken heaters and translating junk manuals for ration credits, sleeping alone in a metal box beneath an old transit bridge, and telling himself every day that he deserved this, that loneliness was punishment for everything he had allowed to happen. And as he carried her into the shadows, his ribs ached from old fractures. His knees burned from frost damage, and he whispered, "Stay quiet," not like a command, but like a prayer, because he could hear boots nearby and the clicking of alien armor joints. And then 2 Dominion patrols rounded the corner, tall and insect-sleek in dark plating, lenses glowing, rifles angled down but ready. And one of them looked at the naked woman pressed to his chest and at Jalen's face with bored contempt, and demanded identification in clipped trade language. And Yalin tasted blood in his mouth from biting his own tongue, and he forced the word out. "Wife," and the soldiers paused, not because they cared, but because Dominion law respected bonds as ownership, and ownership as control. And the lead patrol scanned Jalen's collar tag and saw only a low-level service mark, a nobody, and saw that the woman had no visible registry. And that should have ended her. But the word wife created a delay, a thin line of hesitation in a system that depended on certainty. And Yalin leaned into it, holding her tighter, lowering his eyes as if ashamed, performing the role of a man trying to hide a private failure. And the patrol's lens flickered as it checked for contraband. And for one heartbeat, Yalin thought the scan would see what the storm could not hide. The faint pattern on her neck like silver veins. Not human, not alien, something between. And then the patrol's radio crackled with a new command, and they moved on. And only when their footsteps faded did Yalin let his lungs fill, and he hurried into the underbridge corridor where warm air leaked from old pipes, and he shoved open the door of his shelter. And inside it smelled of rust, oil, and old loneliness. And he wrapped her in his only thermal blanket, the one he had kept from his council days, the last object that smelled like a cleaner life. And he set her beside a small heater that barely worked, and she curled into herself, arms crossed over her chest, not in modesty, but in pain. And her eyes tracked every movement he made, as if she expected him to betray her at any moment. And that look cut him deeper than any insult, because he knew that look. He had worn it once, and he asked her name, and she hesitated, then said softly, "I don't have one they allow," and he told her his name anyway. Yalin, as if offering it could prove he was real. And she whispered, "They call me Sira," like the name was borrowed, like it could be taken back, and she trembled as the heater breathed weak heat. And her skin began to show bruises under the frost, old bruises, not from the storm, from hands, from restraints, from running. And Yalin tried to keep his voice calm as he asked why she was naked, and her throat worked like swallowing glass before she answered, "They stripped me. And then," after a pause that felt like a cliff edge, "they said if I died exposed, no one would bother to bury me." And the sentence was so simple, so casual, that it hit like something heavy dropped in a quiet room. And Yalin found his hands shaking as he cleaned the blood from her leg with melted snow. And the cut was not deep, but it was dirty, and her body was already fighting too many battles. And as he worked, he saw the faint seam at the base of her spine, a scar shaped like a small door, and his stomach turned, because he recognized that scar, because he had seen it in a place he tried to forget. A white laboratory under the council fortress, where men in coats spoke of bridges and compatibility and necessary sacrifice. And Yalin had been there as the language specialist, translating alien biocode into human approval terms, telling himself he was preventing war, telling himself the experiments were consensual because the signatures existed. And now, years later, that scar stared up at him like an accusation. And Sira watched his face and understood, and she asked in a whisper,